We will be starting with the superficial backline. The superficial backline connects and protects the whole posterior side of the body, starting at the bottom of the foot all the way up to the skull in two parts. The posterior function is to support the body in full upright extension. It prevents the tendency to bend over in flexion. Overall movement function is to create extension and hyperextension with the exception of knee flexion. We are now onto the superficial front line. The superficial front line connects the whole anterior surface of the body, starting at the toes up to the pelvis, and from the pelvis up to the head into two pieces. Postural function of the superficial front line is to balance the superficial back line and provide tensile support to the lift parts of the skeleton that extend forward of the gravity line. The overall movement function of the superficial front line is to create flexion of the trunk, flexion of the hips, extension of the knee, and dorsiflexion of the foot. We are moving on to the lateral line. The lateral line are brackets on each side of the body, starting from the lateral and the medial point of the foot around the outside of the ankle up to the leg and thigh laterally, passing along the trunk in a shoelace pattern under the shoulder to the skull. The posterior function of the lateral line is to balance the front and the back and bilaterally from left to right. The movement function of the lateral line is to create lateral bend of the body, lateral flexion of the trunk, adduction of the hips, and evasion of the foot. We now move on to the spiral line. The spiral line loops around the body in a double helix, joining on each side of the skull across the upper back to the opposite shoulder, and then round the ribs, which crosses in the front of the level of the navel to the same hip. From the hip, the spiral line passes along the anterior lateral thigh and shin to the medial longitudinal arch. Finally passes under the foot, running up the back and outside the leg to the ischium and into the erector myofascial, to the end, to the very close to where the skull starts. The postural function of the spiral line is to help maintain balance across all planes, such as the sagittal plane, the frontal plane, and the transverse plane. The movement function of the spiral line is to create and mediate rotations and spirals in the body during eccentric and isometric contractions, steadying the trunk and the leg to keep from folding into rotational collapse. What makes the front and the back functional lines so unique is that it gives extra power and precision to the movement of the limbs. It also shifts forces and works together with other fascial lines. They are also mostly used as movers.